landings 40 years ago, many people have felt that going into space was an expensive luxury that we could do without. I believe the opposite, that humanity needs to go into space fast or we're doomed to extinction. There are two reasons. The first is global warming. I used to be completely ignorant of this subject. I was on holiday in Iceland in 2005 when I first heard the phrase global warming. We were at Jökulsárlón, the lagoon where the largest glacier in Europe meets the sea. One of the staff members there told me that the glacier was receding by 100 metres per year. Why is that? I said. Global warming, she replied. What a strange notion, I thought, that the world should be getting warmer. Oh well, I expect it'll cool down again in a year or two. Some hope. Like me, many people are not convinced about global warming. It's hardly surprising, since there are people out there who are actually paid large sums of cash to deny that global warming is real. You can read about it in chapter 2 of this book. I think that's completely shocking. How dare people peddle bogus science for cash, which could result in the end in more deaths than Hitler was responsible for. And yet the amazing thing is that they haven't committed a crime that could be tried in a court. How ludicrous is that? But even if we did all believe that global warming is a reality, who is going to stop travelling to see their elderly relatives? We have friends in this road who make the 5-hour trip to Manchester every few weeks to see her ailing mum. Sometimes this happens at precisely the same moment that other friends we have in Manchester are making the return journey here to see somebody in this road, similar purpose. I also have friends who travel to Australia every year to see relatives. I don't blame them. Family ties are strong, and thank goodness they are. But it doesn't half keep cars and planes on the road and in the air. No, we are going to need a giant sunshade in space to keep some of the sun's heat from hitting the Earth. Otherwise, runaway global warming looks increasingly likely, according to the latest predictions. If left unchecked, rising temperatures will ultimately kill off all life, including humanity. So space engineering needs to go up a gear and fast. There's a second reason to go into space, and that's because of the coming energy and resources crunch. Resources on the Earth are running out. Take oil, for example. We currently have about 40 years' worth left if we go on using it at the current rate. It's hard to imagine just how difficult life will be when oil runs short. James Howard Kunstler has predicted the complete breakdown of society in what he calls the long emergency when it happens. That's a serious matter. It's not just transport and electricity that will be affected. Did you know that pesticides and fertilizers are made from oil and natural gas? So the day will soon come when we need to go into space to get oil, seems to me. Did you know that Jupiter has 3 times the volume of the Earth in hydrocarbons floating in its atmosphere? Mind you, it may be very difficult to harvest, but I don't think we're going to have much choice. Or take phosphorus, so essential for growing food. We urgently need to find another source before the Earth's supply is exhausted in a few decades' time to avoid widespread famine. The energy and resources crunch will not be a temporary affair. With world population growing, both global warming and world shortages will become more acute each year. Also, don't expect common sense to win the day regarding conserving stocks. It didn't prevail over the 185,000 whales in the South Atlantic near South Georgia. Over a 60-year period, they were slaughtered to virtual extinction, as were Newfoundland cod in the North Atlantic a few decades later. The wise course of action will always come second to the love of money, it seems to me. So, given that both global warming and the resources shortage are strong motivating factors for going into space, how can we become more at home in space? Well, thankfully, there's a better solution than rockets, which are very inefficient and expensive. Enter the space elevator. It's an idea whose time has come. You can see it as a 55,000-mile cable stretching upwards into space, whirling round and round with a weight on the end to keep it taut.
Much longer.
Or think of it as a satellite on the geostationary orbit so wide that its bottom reaches the Earth and its top goes out the same distance away from us. Its construction will be very expensive, and what's more, we don't yet have the materials strong enough to make the cable, although we're working on it. But if we could build one, note that the running costs will be very low. This is because, although gravity is a drag below the midpoint, above the midpoint, centrifugal force takes over. This means that payloads higher up the cable can pull up payloads further down. The cost of putting a ton into orbit will shrink dramatically compared to today's rockets. Another advantage is that as you go further up the cable from the midpoint, to achieve escape velocity, you simply have to leave go. Yes, it could be fun. And also, getting to the moon and the asteroid belt for mining purposes just became a whole lot easier. Thank you very much. With a space elevator in place, we would be in a position to create the giant sunshades which I think will be needed to slow global warming. We'll also be able to mine the solar system much more effectively with the easy access to space it offers. Now, here's an interesting insight on this subject from an unexpected source. I've been reading and studying the Bible for 40 years, and I've gradually come to the conclusion that every single truth about today's world is in its covers somewhere. So the question in my mind was, does it have anything to say about man going into space? You can imagine how thrilled I was when I came across a passage which seemed to give the answer yes. It's in Psalm 8. Psalm 8 is about God's creation. There are two phrases that refer to it, the work of your fingers and the works of your hands. They're one and the same. In the first instance, the psalmist writes, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars which you set in place," and in the second place, "You have made him," that's humanity, "ruler over the works of your hands. You've put everything under his feet." So the implication of that is that that includes the moon and the stars, which we saw up there. I find that very exciting. I also like the fact that in Star Wars, the main character is called Luke Skywalker. He had the moon and stars under his feet, and he saved humanity. And I think that today, the ones building the space elevator are similarly going to be the Skywalkers who will save humanity. Personally, I feel very excited about the future. I think humanity is going to spread out over the galaxy and beyond. I think it's great what's coming. Anyway, back to the present. There's a grim story about a frog who jumped into a pan on the stove. And because it was cool and inviting, he didn't try to jump out, and he didn't know that it was heating up gradually. When it became too hot for him, he did try to jump, but his legs were now part cooked and he couldn't get out, so he ended up being boiled. It would be very grim if this turned out to be a parable for the whole human race, that we didn't do enough about global warming when we could have done because it was so gradual and ended up in trouble. Thank you for your interest, and may you have a cooler and more productive future than you would otherwise have had as we build the world's first space elevator.